You're listening to the Recovered Life Show.
Kristina, you brought this to my attention.
I did.
This first thing, and you sent me a text on this, and I was looking at it,
Blew me
and
mind.
I got to tell you, I did not know how to pronounce this word.
I'm going with Nitazenes. That's what I'm going. I tried to find out how to pronounce it, but I, called some medical professionals. That's why we're reporting on it, because most people are not familiar with that. They're familiar with fentanyl, but Nitazenes and cardafentanil, do you remember how to say that one? Cardafentanil.
Cardafentanil. Yeah.
And I had not heard of these, and I wanted people to see that. This is a synthetic opiate that was invented 60 years ago. And it was basically trying to find a replacement for morphine for pain, but it is not approved. In fact, one of the medical professionals in this article from US News, and I found several articles on this. I mean, this news article came out February 17th, 2022. So this is fresh news. Some of them said there's literally no medical use for it. Some articles said 20 times more powerful than fentanyl. Some said 40 times more powerful than fentanyl.
Yeah.
And they're finding it on the streets now. They're finding it. They found it in 5 different states. So that's something to watch out for. California, Iowa, Louisiana, New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. And I think that we also found out it's in Washington.
Yeah. And this is a crazy thing. For those of you that are watching this on the live stream or replay of this, I brought up the US News article, and this was crazy. Like I had heard about opioid addiction, obviously,
of course.
And look, we come across, you're in the coaching world, and if you're in the recovery world at all, you're gonna come across people that have been addicted to opioids. So this is nothing new. Like I think all the way through the last, I would say, 10 years. There's been an increasing people that have joined the recovery movement that just were opioid addicts, right?
They were.
But this is crazy. Like when you go into this article and about that, it has no legitimate medical use, because opioids actually do have, for people who don't have addiction problems, have use, in the civilian world,
right?
As I would say. But this was so crazy how not only addictive this was, but how deadly this was.
That's the scary part. So with people that are, in the throes of addiction, they are IV users. We know that there's been a huge transfer from opioids, which were medically prescribed, started off very innocently to take care of pain. I know this story isn't about it, but we do know that there were definitely liberties taken in the description of opioids to patients, not realizing it was addictive. And then they found themselves dry, their source was dried up, and they started moving over to heroin, right? Because heroin was cheaper than actually finding pills. And now we know, and there's been a lot of discussion. I think we discussed this on Monday about how many deaths have happened. It's up 40% in some states of people that are going after something that is dangerous but not deadly, and finding out that it's been laced with something that's incredibly deadly, like fentanyl. And now this one, 20 to 40 times more powerful, and they're finding it. And so I think it's important to share it because of harm reduction and trying to save lives.
Yeah, it just seems like sometimes I look at the news about addiction, and sometimes it just seems worse and worse and worse. It's like it gets worse. Like the drugs become more deadly. And I think the thing that gets me about the opioid thing and the fentanyl thing is that the amounts of it.
Yes.
So people could be not understanding what they're actually taking. And they take way too much of it, right? And that's the thing with fentanyl. But what got me about this article, and as I started to do some research, I was like, wow, this is a huge deal. Like this is big. This is just as big as when fentanyl started.
It is. And you can do it. You can snort it. You can take it. And so let's say you're out there and you party and maybe you feel like you don't have an addiction problem. It could take your life.
And the reason why we're bringing this is we have a lot of new people that are getting into recovery, and maybe they're relapsing and they're not they're not really
Understanding that last.
understanding, that, and then they gateway into something else. And the other reason that I want to do this too is that so many people that are living in active recovery, that have lived in active recovery for decades, have family members and kids and stuff that are going to college. I
Right.
talk with this kid that he's not a kid. I mean, he's in his early 20s, and he was talking about how ketamine, that people were taking ketamine on campus, which is like
Absolutely.
a veterinary tranquilizer, right?
Well,
Like,
and,
and
and
I was like, you got to be
carfentanil.
kidding me.
Carfentanil is
Yeah.
used to euthanize animals, right?
Ugh.
And people are not recognizing how dangerous this is, and most of the time they don't even know. So, in the vein of harm reduction, whether you believe in it, whether you don't believe in it, it
Yeah.
is saving lives. It is helping people stay away from these life-threatening drugs, and move on to something else until they can get to recovery.
Well,
Um,
when we were talking, I said when I started to do some research, and I want to play a little clip from
yes, do.
a Washington State TV station, which we'll give the credit to after you see the clip here, about how prevalent this is now, this opioid addiction, in Seattle, and about the amount of deaths and overdoses on the street that are going
Right.
on. I mean, when you watch this, it was shocking, right? I mean,
Well, and it's not just relegated to the streets either. We hear about one or two people, a young college student loses his life or she loses her life because she didn't expect it. We had that happen here in Newport Beach where, there were 5 people. One girl went home and decided she didn't want to do. All 4 of the others died. And so some stories get a lot of press, but it is happening, like you said, on the streets. And we are not recognizing, I think, how powerful it is and how quickly it can happen. And we do not want that to show up
yeah,
in
I
our
think
lives.
awareness is the first the
Yes.
first step here. So let's roll this clip, because I think this is a really good clip, because this is actually someone who's been fighting this benzodiazepine and the nitazene
Yes.
addiction. So I'm gonna roll this clip right now that was taken from a Washington TV station.
Great.
This alley to me has been home for a very long time because it's where I slept.
Ash Mako knows the underbelly of drug addiction.
It is hard to see someone go from near death to breathing.
Good timing and Narcan. The opioid reversal drug helped him to save a man's life, but it's even more personal.
I carry Narcan with me because I myself have been revived with it, and if I wasn't, I'd be dead.
Ash OD'd on opioid pain pills. Every day, 2 people in our state overdose on opioids, and now a new threat, carfentanil.
When you heard about the carfentanil in the syringe, what was your reaction? Do you remember?
I was like, oh, crap.
Caleb Bantagreen is a researcher and scientist at UW's Alcohol and Drug Abuse Institute.
It's even that much more strong than fentanyl. And so you need even less of it to get a lot of people high on it or kill people on it.
The state crime lab discovered traces of carfentanil in a syringe mixed with other drugs right here at this unauthorized homeless camp near the Fremont Troll. It's where 5 people OD'd on the same day in January. We still don't know yet if that carfentanil is connected to those 5 overdoses, but the health department raised the red flag about it in this blog post, calling it deadly but rare in our state.
With these newer synthetic opioids we think are mostly coming in from China, they're so potent you just have to ship a little bit.
In short, it's here because it's profitable.
Carfentanil is used for large animals, not for human beings. It's not safe for human beings.
Bantagreen says users don't know what they're getting. It's sold as a white powder substance or in pill form.
We've been hearing about big increases in fentanyl and other fentanyl-related drugs from the East Coast and the Midwest for several years.
6 overdose deaths in Maryland were linked to carfentanil in 2017. In that blog post about carfentanil in Seattle, this advice: if you do illicit drugs, don't use alone and always carry Narcan.
Well, I
Wow.
mean, was that not crazy?
Right.
Like-
It's so frightening. So frightening. Like she said, they don't know what they're getting. People
Yeah.
don't know what they're doing, and the fact that it's so easy to sneak into this country makes it incredibly powerful and
Yeah.
something we have to talk about.
Yeah, the thing that I got from this that was is that this has already been going on, and then the mainstream kind of hears about it, right? And just from an addiction standpoint, and that's what the show is about, we might have people that are listening to this that are addicted to these drugs, or have a family member that is.
Mm-hmm.
And the question I always have is that, is this different? Are these designer drugs somehow, is the treatment for addiction different? And I
No.
will tell you, see, I kind of agree. I disagree a little bit with you.
Go for it.
Kristina, okay? Because having worked with people that are coming in from alcohol or recovery, right? I
Mm-hmm.
believe that, that whole benzodiazepine class, I do believe that psychologically, as far as your
Oh, yes.
memory and things like that, I believe that it trails a little bit more. And after talking to psych nurses and stuff, I saw this with meth. There were a lot of people, and this is going to be, look, guys, this is going to be controversial. I always say the thing, Kristina, that everybody hates, right? They put in the comments like, Damon, why is Damon so negative? Yeah, I'm not. I'm just saying that, like, what I saw, like when I saw meth come on the scene, and I was not somebody who took drugs. I was like, that's just not me, right?
Right.
Like alcohol was my thing. But when I saw meth come in, I saw the rates of people getting sober go way, way down, right? And meth treatment, what would happen is I would see people who had the deal, that were doing the deal, and would have these like little, I'm just going to say like mini emotional relapses, not
Mm-hmm.
like you would see in alcohol, like you have those with alcohol, but it was almost like a chemical kind of reliving of it, right?
Yes.
And I
Well,
would see them
yes.
going. And so, I think the process isn't any different. Like, I agree with you. It's like, people got to come in and they've got to like decide, hey, am I willing to do this or am I willing not? But I'm wondering, like, what is the long-term effects of people trying to get in recovery when they've been taking, nitazenes and stuff?
Well, it's so new in many ways. Even though the drug was created 60 years ago, this is the first time we're seeing it. And I believe that we'll see it in every state very shortly. And so we don't necessarily have the studies. A lot of times we talk about the quick concern, but we have no idea. I mean, as an interventionist, the treatment is the same, but each one of these drugs, including alcohol is still responsible for the most deaths when you are trying to recover. You have to do it with medical supervision. And that's why I bring up harm reduction. And I know harm reduction is controversial, but you have to make your road in recovery a little wider at first and continue to make it narrow. And we need to have medical help when getting rid of these drugs. We need to have not only actual physical help, we need behavioral help. And sometimes, often, like if I'm placing a client, I need to make sure that where they're getting placed actually has the tools to handle, the meth use, the eating disorder, the behavioral issues. So not only does it cost something, a lot of people have depression and anxiety. And if it takes 6 months to just even get 50%, these are studies that we know, 6 months to get 50% of your brain back. And that's a very crude way of saying it, but to have access to your brain with alcohol, I can only imagine how much longer this does.
Well, here's the thing. It was interesting. Several months ago, it was almost a year ago, I had an interview. It was like last summer. I had an interview with a scientist who was working in the opioid addiction thing. And he was not in recovery, but this was his whole focus, right? Was to develop new ways for people to detox from opioids. And one of the things that's interesting about opioids is the detox cure for opioids is opioids.
Yes.
And so what we were talking about with this is about, like, in a way, how crazy that is, right? But like he said, there's no other way, because of the thing with opioids that makes it a little different is the nerves in your body are like, it really affects the nerves, and opioids cycle through your body at different times, right?
Right.
So you could be sober as a church mouse for 90 days, 6 months, but have some sort of opioid physical relapse right
Yes.
now. Of course, I'm not a doctor, guys, and don't quote me, and I'm not, but I've seen this personally in just working in recovery, right? With
Right.
trying to help people get sober, that, I've seen this. I've seen people 6 months, a year, and talking with people who are psych nurses and doctors that are also in recovery that are working, and they're telling me, they're like, you know what, this is cycling through your body. So it's not a one and done like detox where
No.
you're through it
Right.
with alcohol and then you're kind of through it. Like you'll have cravings, but it's different. People with opioids are actually feeling this
Yes.
for so long.
And all of the things, I recently worked with a client who went under anesthesia for a medical procedure. It was necessary. And the feelings that came up just because it was close to some of the things that they used in the past caused a lot of distress for this person. And I think the more that we talk about it, the more that we understand, this is important for the world to not relegate everybody into, they're out there, dirty needles, they're addicts, we don't have to care about them. People get into real trouble. People that weren't expecting it, like you said, they never had a problem before, and all of a sudden they are addicted to opiates. Opiates attach to your opioid receptor, right? That's how they work. And like you said, the nerves deaden, right? And so it's very simple. Unlike alcohol, which processes through the liver, you can process one drink at a time, one drink per hour, and you can get it out of your bloodstream sooner. These hide. And it's really important to work with an interventionist or to work with a professional, medical professional, to make sure that you can ride that wave when it shows up and to have alternatives.
Yeah. And I think that just that clip that we saw, and I'd like to thank, the people who produced that. It was a local, it's called Como News in Washington.
Okay.
And, Washington is seeing this huge explosion
Yes.
of fentanyl and nitazenes and all of these benzos and the illegal benzos coming over from China.
Wow.
Like it said, and really kind of going through the streets. But like you said before, Kristina, it's not just the streets. It's housewives, it's dads, it's everybody, it's executives, and they're taking these designer drugs. But what's happening is the response is not what they think it is. I mean, it was so sad to watch that this kid's got to walk around, in a civilized world with Narcan, right? Hitting people with Narcan. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because with science, the drugs are just going to become more designer and more designer.
They are. And with the legalization of marijuana, there is a big push from illegal, drug dealers to get this on the streets and have it available. And so that's one of the reasons why we've seen this shift, because all drugs are about money, right? And that's a huge motivation for certain cartels and different people. And I know that's kind of a weird thing to say, but that's truly what's happening.
It's true.
The minute marijuana was legalized in most states, all of a sudden there became a huge marketing campaign for these designer drugs. So
absolutely,
it's something to have guard against.
Not only did it become a market for it, but I think that people in recovery are not geared to deal with this. And I'm going to tell you this too, because there's a lot of misinformation out there regarding drugs and recovery in general that I found.
Right.
That there was a lot of things that I believed that I was told or taught in 12-step groups. And I love 12. I don't want the comments that I hate 12. I love.
He loves 12 steps. He loves it.
I do. Kristina knows me personally, and I'm big on that. But there's a lot of misinformation on it, Kristina.
There is.
And I've heard things, and and I actually believe things like, I've heard things like, hey, I'm, I don't want to be graphic, but I know people who, you're going to have to take a drug. If you get sober like me in your 20s, you're going to have to take some sort of anesthesia or drug in your lifetime. You're going to have a surgery. The emergency is going to have to happen. Something will happen where you have to do this, even like colonoscopy. I don't want to be rude, but I've heard people say, don't take a drug for that at all. But they come in for alcohol and they've been sober for years. Like, there's a lot of misinformation.
A lot of black and white thinking. A lot of black and white thinking.
Yeah. Well, this is the cult mentality. And again, I'm going to get myself in trouble, but this is the cult mentality of a bunch of people running around, not really knowing what they're talking about,
True. True. And
right?
I mean, and you could go further and talk about, when I first, because you and I got sober both in the 90s, there was a lot of discussion against medications that perhaps help people. I am much more open these days than I was for ADHD medication or antidepressants. And I remember that being a big no-no originally. And there are definite cases in which an antidepressant is important. It's important to have that during certain parts of our lives. As a mom of a special needs child, I definitely have had to utilize that option to be able to show up for him. And I know that there was a little bit of shame attached to it. And I fully
Yeah.
believe that there shouldn't be.
Well, you know what? I got to tell you, it's the wrong conversation that people are having
Right.
in the recovery community. They're having this abstinence conversation that doesn't apply. Like if I fall down and break my leg and they have to give me anesthesia, I have not relapsed, right? Like,
No, not
and
at
there
all.
are people, by the way, and I'm just, and this might be shocking to some people that are listening. There are some people that believe, well, you have relapsed because you've died. And it's absolutely ridiculous, in my
It
opinion.
still
And
is.
and you know what? And there's a lot, and I've seen people die that have had mental health issues. I've seen people literally get wiped out because they've believed this. Now, at the same time, I've seen medical abuse
Of course.
in 12 steps where they've said you're this ism, you're that ism, and they load people up with drugs before they actually have an ability to get sober. I've known people who are diagnosed schizophrenic, that have been diagnosed bipolar, that have been diagnosed with 5 other things, but actually after they got sober, they were fine. They
Right.
got they were none of these things, but the doctor had no idea how to deal with it, so they just throw drugs at it and they walk away, right? So it's an educational thing, and I think as this goes on, that's why we're doing the show partially.
Exactly.
Like we know that like there's funner things. We could talk about resentments or something like
Oh,
that.
that's so fun.
And we do in some episodes, right? We do in some episodes. But the fact of the matter is is that these are things that really take people out in recovery, not having these conversations.
Absolutely.
Not having these conversations.
We
And that's
must
what
keep doing it.
absolutely we have to, because the thing is that the drugs are only going to get more designer. The application in the medical world, like what you're able to do medically and what you're not able to do medically, has changed, right? You don't have a choice to do certain things anymore, right? Like so the thing is I think the more that we focus and bring light to this issue, the better off we're going to be.
Absolutely. We need to do it with our children too.